Thank you everyone for joining, and I appreciate everyone logging in. Those of you that have been a part of our prior two webinar series, I'm sure that you are, piquing your curiosity over how you can migrate off of Horizon or vSphere with a solution like Citrix. And today we're going to be talking about our joint solution with Nutanix. So I am opening the agenda here today. We're going to talk a little bit about how Nutanix delivers reliability, performance, and security for your end user computing workloads. We'll talk a little bit about flexibility of our Citrix platform on the Nutanix cloud platform. We'll touch on hybrid multi-cloud, and we'll also start looking at, if you are considering moving to the solution, you're going to want to start considering what's my migration going to start looking like. So for this discussion here today, I wanted to quickly introduce myself and my co-panelists. I'm Danny Batra. I'm a senior principal technology specialist here at Citrix, and I work on the go-to-market team. With me today from Citrix as well is Paul Murray. He is an end-user computing architect and is creating awareness around Down syndrome. And with us today also from Nutanix, I have the EUC architect, Kevin Bacon. So welcome to all those that are joining me here today. And let's go ahead and get started. So, we do often tout quite a bit about the performance and reliability of our virtualization platforms. Obviously, that's something that, does rely on equally performant and reliable and secure hosting infrastructure. And that's where the Nutanix magic comes in as well. So I wanted to ask you, Kevin, perhaps, can you talk and expand a little bit on that Nutanix reliability, performance, and security capabilities that make your platform special for hosting these workloads?
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. And it really starts with Nutanix and our past around hyper-converged and now doing hybrid cloud, right? So Nutanix handles everything in that infrastructure services. So if we take a look at this first slide here, and so Nutanix has what we call the Nutanix Cloud Platform, right? So it starts with these hyper-converged infrastructure services, right? So think about your hypervisor, your storage, the management and operations, the security and compliance, as well as all the user data for like user profiles, profile management, all that, right? And what's genius about this technology is it's dynamically scales up and down to get to the amount of users, the amount of applications that your organization has. And we can go from data center to colo to service provider to public cloud, all with the same exact tooling. And then our partnership with Citrix, going back 10 years now, allows us to run all the Citrix capabilities on top of this platform without needing any other third party than any other storage solutions or hypervisors or any of those other things that you're used to having to put together. So if you look at all those, all the EUC solutions that we have, it's AHV, right? So that's the Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor. Basically, that's our drop-in replacement for if you were using VMware, would be like ESXi. So we don't need that hypervisor anymore. That comes built into the solution. It's included with the servers and the storage that you buy from us, right? And then we add on Nutanix files. So that allows you not just to run the VMs, right? The virtual desktops, the virtual apps on us, but also run your user data. So it could be department shares, user profiles, FS Logic, Citrix profile management, all of that data. And then we add on Nutanix Flow network security solution that allows you to do microsegmentation and provide more control over which desktops have access to which applications and which network resources inside your environment. We can do hybrid cloud, like I mentioned. And then a big part of what we're doing is automating, which is all about simplifying and making it easier for both getting the infrastructure stood up, but also managing those day-to-day operations, right? So understanding, do I have desktops that are underutilized or over-resourced? How can I take away some resources and add resources so everyone's getting the good experience that they deserve? And then how do we then take snapshots and replicate and back up and do business continuity, all again automated across data centers or clouds? So we talked a little bit about AHV, right? So if you're going to be moving away from Broadcom with VMware, then you're going to have a replacement for your hypervisor and a replacement for your Horizon, right? So you can see where Nutanix and Citrix is the perfect solution for that, because Citrix is going to take care of all of those Horizon pieces, right? So the brokering, the excellent protocol, the end user experience, the security, the front end, all the monitoring and operations. And then Nutanix is going to take advantage of everything below the operating system. So the hypervisor down to the servers, the storage, and networking, right? So AHV is kind of glues all that together. And it's really a modern cloud ready hypervisor. And what's different about this is it's not a separate offering. Like, you can't buy AHV. You can't install it by itself. It's part of the Nutanix cloud platform by design, and that makes it really simple. It gives it great performance, and especially the storage aspects of it are really, really strong, because Nutanix started with that storage model. And it's really enterprise ready. So what that means is you've got all the capabilities that you would expect, right? So being able to do templates, of course, with your virtual desktops, but things like live migration, dynamic scheduling of VMs, HA, high availability of those VMs, and then all the extra things that you would need, right? Of course, like for Windows 11, you need VTPM, and all those capabilities are built right into the platform, and there's nothing to even install separately or license separately. It even has the same user interface for managing this. So, and like I said, with Citrix, we've been doing this since day one with AHV. So we've been doing that over 9 years. And AHV is by far the biggest workload or the biggest hypervisor choice for our Citrix customers. We're up to 75–80% range now for customers. And we've got over 2,000 customers running this today.
Awesome. No, clearly there's a lot of investment and a lot of dissection into where customers are at and where they are on their journey and what they're going to need. It's certainly coming through on your solution for sure. And one of the things that we often tout about is the flexibility of our own platform. And we talk about being able to be agile and nimble and at the speed of business. Can you touch on perhaps some of the agility and flexibility of the Nutanix platform and its ability to kind of move at the speed of business as well?
Yeah, I mean, the flexibility is really key. One of the things that I learned as a Citrix consultant and someone who had to implement and design Citrix implementations starting many years ago is it's very difficult to predict the future, right? Everybody knows how many users they had yesterday, but no one knows how many users they're going to have tomorrow, right? Because there's so many things that can impact that, right? There's business changes, there's natural disasters, there's pandemics,
right?
jinx, right? Which I heard there's a new one, so hopefully that one's going to be okay. We're not going to think about that. And but so you always have to be ready. I'm here in South Florida, and of course this is hurricane season, so that's always the mind. But everywhere you go, there's going to be something, right? There's always going to be something that could happen, and you want to be ready. So having that flexibility at the Citrix level has always been a given, and always been a huge advantage of doing Citrix. But you've got to have the infrastructure that's elastic, that can support all those users, not only on a regular day, but also on a really busy day. And so Nutanix has designed this scale out storage system and then a scale out hypervisor and cloud platform. So we scaled it out within a cluster. So what's really neat about the how we design this is you can add nodes to the cluster while the cluster is online. So you can start with 3, 4, or 5 servers in your cluster, and then you can keep adding 10, 15, 20, 25 servers in the cluster, and there's no downtime. You can be doing this in the middle of the day. You can even move nodes between clusters for different workloads. And then what we've been doing the last few years is taking advantage of the public cloud, right? Where we can actually dynamically spin whole clusters up in your public cloud instances. So now you can leverage AWS or Azure and bare metal, and we can spin up these Nutanix clusters, and then it's the same exact hypervisor, the same exact management interface, the same exact integration with Citrix. So everything you've done on-prem just slides beautifully right into cloud, and in under an hour, you can be running desktops. We've got a demo online where you can do 2,000 desktops in under an hour, just spinning up in your cloud of choice. Basically, it's able to take this whole stack, right? So this is a slide that we share a lot because it shows all the different layers, right? To this, ultimately, you're talking about delivering this excellent user experience. So, Citrix has a big part of the job. Nutanix takes a big part of the infrastructure part of the job, right? So we talked about the virtualization, the physical server compute, the storage, both the VM storage and user storage, data protection, backup, replication, DR, all that kind of stuff, and then networking security, right? So being able to make sure you have an easy way to manage all the networks for those desktops. And then Citrix has all those layers at the top, right? That I'm sure your customers are familiar with. And so this gives you this really simple model to then drop in, a cluster, a node, whatever you want, and you're going to get that consistent user experience. And you can do this in hours. Most of these projects, I've seen customers do these projects in months. And I've seen customers leave, servers, in the boxes for over a year. With Nutanix, we don't do that. As soon as you get it, we can install everything. Rack and stack takes a couple hours. It's a very, very simple model. And then we have an automated tool that does the entire installation for you. So again, very, very simple, very flexible. Ultimately, it's about getting this linear scale, right? So what we want is that the experience you have with, one cluster is going to be the same experience you have with your second cluster. The experience you have with the first 10 nodes is going to be the same experience. So as you're adding users, adding applications, adding workloads, adding additional tooling, it all has this consistent experience. And a lot of that is driven by what we can do at the storage level. A lot of customers had some iffy experience in the past, right? Because they were leveraging SAN storage that maybe wasn't performing very well, wasn't consistent, maybe good one day, the next day, kind of questionable, or they had a lot of extra users join one day and all of a sudden the storage couldn't handle that. So Nutanix has all the storage built into the nodes. There's no external storage at all. So the nodes come with all the storage you need, and then we pool all these local disks that are part of the cluster together to form basically one virtual storage container or storage pool. So that way you're sharing, you've got the HA and the availability of all the data throughout the cluster, but you've got that local performance, right? Which means it's the best possible performance and it's consistent from one user to the next.
Awesome. I see a lot of synergies in the way that we architect our technology stacks, by the way.
Exactly right. It's very software defined, and it's all about having a strong infrastructure, strong architecture. So yeah, this is on the Citrix integration. It's really really everything basically. But to give you an idea, of course, the Citrix brokers that could be. And this is all tied in with HV and the rest of the Nutanix storage and networking and everything else, right? So that's of course going to be the Citrix brokers, whether that's on-prem or Citrix Cloud. All of that is tied in. Citrix Director, Citrix Provisioning, you've got both MCS and PVS, great support for both of those. NetScaler virtual appliances, app layering, even session recording for all the data, being able to store that on Nutanix files. So all of these are tested, supported, and live customers running all of these solutions. And it just makes sure that everything you're doing today with Citrix is gonna be work flawlessly on Nutanix.
So I didn't want to interrupt there, but just before you go back one piece to the integration, I know it's a very simple thing to say, but I think what is important is that the integration is done by both companies. Historically, I think Nutanix engineering first started to develop the plugins to enable you to be able to connect Citrix Cloud and Nutanix on-prem stuff like that. But over the years, there's co-engineering, so they're certainly developed together. Inside Citrix, when you talk about the CVAD or virtual apps and desktops, and you talk about NetScaler, so at Citrix they're different business units. But again, we're working as if you want, a single entity to make sure that the pieces that are required to be able to push out these desktops, push out the resources to employees are definitely integrated. So it's easy to say on a slide the integration is there, but it is definitely co-engineering with all these pieces, and it makes it a big difference.
They're features, right? That we've spent time, money, investments, and we know that it's what our customers are looking for. Great that we have a partner in Nutanix that could not only make sure that those features come through, but that they're performant, and that they're properly supported on the back end infrastructure as well. Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. Awesome. Well, Paul, you jumped in. It's a kind of a good segue.
Yeah, I didn't want to just sit in the background and sit there and twiddle my thumb. No, it's all good.
Yeah,
All good.
all good, all good. I'm gonna get you in the mix here. You weren't gonna get out that easy. So speaking of like hybrid, we're starting to touch a little bit on where that infrastructure lies, and I know the Nutanix platform quite well, as what our customers are often touting, which is like hybrid is their future state, right? They don't see themselves kind of moving full cloud or full on-prem. They want to be in this kind of hybrid state of mind. If that's the case, can you shed some light a little bit on what you're seeing also within the field, as well as just your own experience of what the hybrid cloud ready approach with Citrix Nutanix brings to the table?
Sure. It's never really going to be a short conversation. Let me get something up on the screen, but I mean the whole conversation around clouds, it can mean different things, or it does mean different things to different customers. I mean, I know that we at Citrix, we tried to get everybody to go to cloud many years ago. You could look at posts on LinkedIn or technical articles, and everybody was saying cloud is the future, cloud is the future. But ultimately, the customer or the IT guys, they want to be able to run those workloads, run those applications where it makes most sense. Makes most sense can mean a couple of things. It means different things to different people. It can be based on financial definitions or financial constraints. It can be based on security. But ultimately, the guys or the people responsible for deploying these workloads, they need to be sure that where they deploy it is the right location. Where they deploy it makes most sense, like I said, based on certain criteria. So I've been at Citrix for quite a few years in various roles. I was at Nutanix for a couple of years, and I know I'm talking with Danny, with Kevin on this webinar. Personally, to me, the whole Citrix Nutanix stack just makes sense. Just makes sense for a couple of reasons. So Kevin went through the stuff like data locality and always ensuring that the workloads are running closest to the hypervisor, or the data is close to the hypervisor, so that performance in terms of you're never going to get faster than local. In terms of the platform, so we look at the Citrix platform. Now, over the years, we've had many iterations, but I think what's important here is we are offering customers the flexibility, like I said, to decide where you want to run these workloads. So a couple of years ago, we came up with the term destination hybrid. And what that means to me is I can choose where to run that workloads. I've got the ability, like I said, to be able to run that workload, but also knowing or also understanding that for the employees, for the end users, that how they access those applications is going to be consistent. So I can start out whatever device I got. I authenticate. It could be through Storefront. It could be through Workspace. But I authenticate through this piece of software that is on that device that I'm using, and I get access to those applications. And then the brokering technology behind decides or understands or knows where those applications are coming from. So whether it's IT managed CVAD, so that's typically on-prem stuff or on-premises, or whether it's cloud-based through Citrix Cloud Services. That management stack also introduces things like, where are those workloads? How do I, as an administrator, have a simplified administration experience on that? So the complete administration in terms of the admin of those workloads is simplified. We'll cover into that in a couple of seconds when we talk about Nutanix clusters or cloud clusters. But what's important for the IT admins is I manage that entity, my workloads. It doesn't really matter where those workloads are. I've got the ability to be able to manage those, to make configuration changes, to update applications or whatever. In terms of the workloads, we've got a few variations there. Again, come to those in a few seconds, but when we talk about desktops, it's not just a Windows desktop. If you need Mac OS access or if you need Linux applications, we can do that as well. And then talking about hosting, okay, this session is around Nutanix, obviously. So Nutanix AHV. I think what's important there is to have that sort of abstraction layer where the workload, so your Citrix stack, and what I mean by Citrix stack is your applications, the server infrastructure, the desktop infrastructure, that essentially becomes just a box that you can transport between different cloud platforms, whether it's on-prem or public cloud services. But I think what's important for a customer is, like I said, this definition of hybrid multi-cloud. So that is different for every customer. So when we come to the platform we just went through, when we come to the sort of access layer for the employees, it's important that I can build a solution, a platform that matches my requirements, that I'm not constrained by the underlying platform, by the delivery mechanisms. So in this case, what I've built here is, again, it was an example for some Citrix user group sessions about a year ago. But what I've essentially built here is I had a Nutanix cluster on-prem. Yeah, I've got a Nutanix cluster down in the cellar. So that's running AHV. I then installed applications on there. So I installed Server 2022. I installed the applications, pushed those out to the users. And you see that on the Citrix user group Windows on AHV. It's just an example of giving that access. As a company, what I then wanted to be able to do was to be able to expand that to a cloud platform, to a public cloud platform. We'll come on to this in the next slide. But what's important here is I didn't want to have to go through the whole exercise of converting this to Microsoft Azure or converting this to AWS. What I want as the IT administrator is the ability to be able to take my definition of the servers, the applications, and basically transport those to a public cloud platform. It could also be Linux applications, Windows applications, really doesn't matter. And one thing I just wanted to add in here when we're talking about security is the ability for the Citrix platform through a thing called secure private access to be able to allow access to internal web applications. So the example on the screen there is a smart home IoT. What I had there was the chance to be able to manage my IT infrastructure from wherever I am in the world doing these demos. But we talked about the Nutanix clusters. So this is where we're getting into that state of I basically build the applications and the server infrastructure according to my definition. And what's critical for me as an admin is the simple ability to be able to transport that or move that to somewhere. So Kevin talked about the Nutanix cloud platform. So talked about this cluster concept. When I was working at Nutanix, I always talked about Nutanix being a storage vendor. Now, that's not meant to be derogatory. They do a lot more. But I've always said once you control this storage plane, you've got the ability to be able to do magic with your applications, with your workloads. So ultimately, what Nutanix have done is they've extended this cluster concept or storage concept to be cloud aware. So the product name is Nutanix Cloud Clusters. And essentially what that does is that allows me as the IT admin to be able to, like I said, package my applications, build this workload, and then transport that image or that box of stuff, I'm not talking about containers, but that box of stuff, to different platforms. So I can transport that image from a private cloud to a public cloud. So again, that gives me the ability to simply and very quickly move those workloads. So you talk about things like cloud burst or the need to be able to run that on a cloud platform according to certain criteria, so security criteria or cost criteria. And I can basically transport or distribute those workloads. So in this one, we've got an example of distributing that workload, so your CVAD infrastructure, from a Nutanix private cloud or maybe to Nutanix NC2 or Nutanix cluster on Azure or AWS or a hosted solution. So again, that gives me complete flexibility in being able to move these workloads. So for the IT admins, the administrators, that is an extremely simplified management. Essentially through zero touch or very, very little interaction, I can move those applications, that workload to where it makes most sense.
Yeah, and Paul, let me jump in there because when I talk to a lot of customers that are, when they're still looking at Nutanix, before they have Nutanix, they say they do hybrid cloud, right? And when I unpack that and I say, well, how are you guys doing hybrid cloud today? Oftentimes it's, oh, we've got VMware in our data center here, and then we're doing native Azure for some desktops over here. And then when you start to unpack that, though, you look at, well, how do you define the images? Well, it's two different processes. How do you define the security? It's two different processes. How do you manage the life cycle of those machines? It's two completely different teams that don't talk to each other. So,
Not quite hybrid.
yeah, so
And
it's
it is hybrid, but it's multi-management.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. It kind of defeats the point, right? I
yeah,
like the
exactly. So I don't really see any advantage there. To me, you've just you've just exponentially increased your work rather than decreasing the work. And in terms of the security posture, it seems like it's much worse than it was before. So, and that's my point is like, private plus public doesn't equal hybrid necessarily, right? It's all about, do you have an infrastructure that can span both and give you the same exact experience, and then can layer on all of your enterprise tools like Citrix, to again make sure you've got that same user experience and all those same policies, right? So for security, for provisioning, for all those things, to make sure you've got a consistent model there.
Yeah, and to Paul's
I
earlier
fully
point,
agree. Sorry, Kevin, go on. Sorry, Dan.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like to your earlier points, like the drivers, business drivers might be different, right? Like it might be you need the storage, uh, close to the nodes. You might need it for security reasons. You might need it for disaster recovery. You might just need it for business agility and scale to tap into and put your resources close to a new emerging market, right? So the business drivers may vary, but having kind of a clear definition of what hybrid means and how you can take advantage of it is certainly up to interpretation, and we certainly could persuade how they interpret or define hybrid.
And I mean, so I'm not deliberately doing advertising for Nutanix, but if you take the whole solution a step further, okay, virtual apps and desktops, or DAS, obviously that gives you access to your Windows applications, your Linux applications. I mentioned secure private access, where that's typically web-based applications. If you take that a step further and look at the way the industry is going, is technologies such as Kubernetes or AI and stuff like that. I mean, that needs storage. These applications, they're still going to be accessed through a Citrix environment. So use Citrix as that sort of common denominator of providing access to those applications. It still needs somewhere to run. So if you look at the world of sort of modern applications where you need, or where you're talking about Kubernetes or containers, where you're talking about AI and GPT stuff, then the Nutanix platform, or I'm speaking for you, Kevin, but the Nutanix platform offers that as part of that stack. That's why I always go, it controls the storage. And once you control storage, you can do magical things.
Right on, right on. So I think then the natural, question is, all right, if I'm sold, I want to kind of move down this path, and I want to entertain moving to the Nutanix platform to host my UC workloads. Like, what does a good project look like? Plan, strategy. Like when I start looking at migrating over to that Nutanix platform, what things should I consider basically? Is this something that you could probably shed some light on, Paul?
I can. I'm just going to defer straight to Kevin about Move. So let me start with Move. So Move, when I worked at Nutanix, was that ability to be able to, like the name sort of suggests, move virtual machines or workloads from one hypervisor type to another. So over the years, I know that Nutanix have expanded that significantly, but it ties into that storage concept. It ties into stuff that you mentioned, Daniel, about the storage, or the storage being close to the node. So I can take that image, I can convert it, and with Nutanix Move, basically push that out to AWS or Azure or private clouds or whatever. So when we look at the the sort of concept in how we'd use that in a Citrix Nutanix world. I mean, if I want to go from on-prem, or if I want to go from ESX on-prem and move that into an AHV world, I can do that hypervisor conversion. So that's how I would start to get up to speed with the migration process. I know there's a lot more behind it. I mean, maybe Kevin, correct everything I've just said about Nutanix Move.
No correction needed. Yeah, Nutanix Move is all about how you bring your existing workloads, those brownfields, how do you bring those into the Nutanix platform, right? Once you're in Nutanix, and you know, then you wouldn't use Move, right? We've got all the tooling built right into the how we do replication and snapshots and DR and all that kind of fun stuff. But it's always how do we ingest all this data, right? And so if you're now when you're talking about a Citrix concept, there's a lot of different things to think about, right? We have the Citrix infrastructure VMs, we've got our virtual desktop images, we may have either non-persistent or persistent pools, maybe some persistent desktops to work with. So depending on what you've got there, what we can do is we point right to your vCenter or right to your AWS or Azure console, and then we can ingest all those VMs non-disruptively to make sure that we're bringing in all that data onto the Nutanix platform and have basically a one switch, right, for those workloads. So you can basically have everything, all the data ready to go in Nutanix. You flip a switch, the VMs power off on your existing platform, power on Nutanix. You do your final testing and make sure you're good, and then you're inside the Nutanix family there. And so we automate that. So say you have 1,000 persistent desktops, you're going to want all those copied over into Nutanix, right? So as part of the implementation, we can just ingest those 1,000 VMs, have them already ready to go in Nutanix HV with all the right Nutanix tools running on them, things like that. And then we'll be ready to go. Now, we also want to take care of all your images, right? So maybe you've got PVS images, maybe you've got some gold templates for your machine creation services. We can also ingest that data as well.
We then need to start talking about how to actually do that. Now, so the sort of content on this slide is documentation around how to migrate from ESX to AHV or from Horizon to CVAD. Now, again, this is a very, very open discussion. It's personal preferences. I mean, you can talk about lift and shift, you can talk about migration planning, things like that. But whichever route you sort of decide to go down, we've got resources there. So if you look at the Citrix stuff, so the Citrix VDI handbook, I mean, that started many, many years ago. But essentially, so it's been recently updated, but essentially it's all around sort of defining the user layer, the access layer, resource layers, control layers, and the like. So it goes through a lot of details around how to, I would say, build this infrastructure. I would say when you understand how to build it, it gives you more insight about how to migrate, or more insight about deciding, do you want to migrate everything? Do you want the lift and shift, or do you want to sort of build new components and then start from scratch is probably wrong, but start building components on a new infrastructure. I mean, if you think about what we're doing, we're going from Horizon View to Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. We're going from ESX to AHV. Now, I know Move works. I know the migration processes work. My take over the years has been an SE, back in the field in Switzerland, stuff like that, was sometimes it's probably better to build from scratch. Depends what your management control is like, what your image control is like. Depends how comfortable you are with the existing solution. So you can make that. You can also use it as a chance to, like I said, build new. But that's the VDI handbook. You then have, we've then got reference architecture guides. So again, goes through the details about how these pieces fit together. And Nutanix have got the same. So, I mean, the solutions engineering group, they push out the reference guides, the validated design guides, and that essentially goes through how to run a CVAD solution or a Citrix solution on a Nutanix architecture. It also goes through the reference guides to, again, build that stuff. So it's not just limited to EUC or end user computing. I mean, they've got it for the whole platform. But the sort of theme here is around getting those workloads in a Nutanix Citrix environment, and the documentation is there.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, it's
have kind of that, flexibility and every customer is different, right? Every customer is going to have their own timeline, projects in mind, but perhaps there's a contract that's coming up, and so depending on whether they choose to start from scratch or lift and shift, I guess every customer will be different.
Yeah, I think of it as a three-legged stool, right? You've got the tooling, you've got the documentation, and you've got the professional services. So you're going to need all three, right? So Move is a big part of the tooling and the Citrix migration tooling as well. You've got, and then the documentation on the Nutanix side, we've got reference architectures and we call Nutanix validated designs. So that's for, depending on your environment, are you using Citrix Cloud or are you using Citrix on-prem? We've got different, is it mostly virtual desktops or mostly virtual apps? So we've got different reference architectures for those different scenarios that are going to, one's going to be pretty close to what you're trying to do. And then we also have a complete best practices guide on migrating to AHV from other hypervisors. And so that really takes into account all those different permutations of, apps, desktops, MCS, PVS, persistent, non-persistent, cloud, on-prem. So all those considerations are documented there. So it's a great resource. And Paul, I thought you had a great point. I mean, trying to figure out if you should lift and shift or start scratch is certainly something you'd have to think about as part of your design, as part of your project planning. And there's a lot of considerations there. There's no right or wrong answers. But I think some of the big things right now is like Windows 11. So a lot of customers are already are still on Windows 10 and are looking to go to Windows 11. That's a great opportunity, right? To just start fresh with Windows 11 and then build out all of your applications and workflows on AHV with Windows 11, right? So we're ready for that. That's something a lot of customers are looking at. And then the other thing is we a lot of times it's good to reconsider some of those decisions you made years ago. A big one that we work with a lot of customers that are going from ESXi to AHV is have them reconsider whether they need Citrix provisioning services and just going 100% machine creation services, because we find that simplifies the environment quite a bit. And especially with Nutanix, again, Paul, like you said, it's a storage company at its core. And MCS is all about having really, really good, strong storage, right? And AHV with Nutanix and everything else gives you this great experience with MCS, with the data locality and the really efficient clones and things like that. Where, I mean, and again, I was a huge fan of PVS when I used to, I used to work for Citrix and did consulting and big fan of provision services, super powerful tool. But for a lot of customers, we've been able to say, hey, what if this could be a lot simpler and have all the same capabilities that you're used to? So those kind of things, I think, are the things to make sure you're reconsidering. Even things like, do you still need a third-party NAS or a NAS appliance? Could we leverage Nutanix files? Really, sometimes with even just the same cluster, can we consolidate that further? Can we simplify the networking? There's so many things there to really, so many opportunities to simplify and to standardize as part of these migrations. And that's where and then on the professional services side, Nutanix has great resources, Nutanix badged that understands Citrix super well. Citrix has great resources that understand Nutanix well. And then we've got a great partner community, depending on where you are. There's going to be great partners that have both the strong Nutanix and Citrix background. So you definitely want to talk to your account teams and local resources to identify those appropriate partners.
The other thing
I'm
too,
not saying anything bad about PVS. But it's true. It's like you said, Kevin. I mean, MCS just makes sense in a Nutanix world. Anything else, you should reevaluate it. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. So guys, the folks on the line are probably wondering, okay, how am I going to get this done? What does the project look like? How am I going to get the additional resources and more importantly, funding, right? How am I going to move some budgets around? Luckily, we flashed this up on a couple of the other series as well. We have some relief for customers if you're new to Citrix and you want to come onto our platform. We do have some minimum commitments, but if you sign up for a 3-year commitment, we have the first year credited back to you as well. And then if you're existing customers in our commercial or enterprise spaces, we have some great sweeteners there for you as well by moving some workloads and adopting more of our platform. And as you're looking at the consideration of migrating over, obviously there's costs, there's some education, there's some burden also on your team, but we could also help, with our paid partners having access to a $25 million fund to help customers move over to the Citrix platform. If you're considering moving away from Horizon and placing some of those workloads also onto Nutanix, that is equally eligible as well. But I think, Kevin, you guys have also a sweetener promotion also, right, to move from VMware over to Nutanix?
Yeah, this is on the infrastructure side, so it's very similar to your promotion on the Horizon side. So basically, for 3 years, we're going to credit you back that 1 year. There's a lot of terms, a lot of details. You can use that QR code or just go to nutanix.com/migration offer to get all those details. But I think that's the point. I mean, you could be a completely new Citrix and completely new Nutanix customer. You could be Citrix and new to Nutanix, or Nutanix and new to Citrix. Or you could be having a mix, and we have a lot of customers that have a mix of Nutanix and VMware, and Citrix and VMware Broadcom. So maybe it's you're trying to share shift. Maybe you're trying to look at, hey, I need to pick one here, right? So am I going to go all VMware? Am I going to go all Citrix? So maybe those promotions are there to help you make those decisions as well. Yeah, Paul. Anything else you think on the migration promotion?
There isn't it. It's like I said, I mean, there's the resources on the web, so on the Citrix page, on the Nutanix pages, but it's a question that doesn't have a single answer. I mean, we talked about it last sort of 5-10 minutes, but you need to evaluate what you got and where you want to get to, and I think it sort of ties in with that destination hybrid story that we came up with about 1.5 years ago at Citrix, where it gives you the flexibility to, like you said, maybe consider new solutions, consider new applications, or getting rid of applications. You talked about files. I mean, when you start migrating stuff, I mean, by default, everybody says, I need to migrate all this data. Maybe you don't. Maybe you can consolidate file shares and put it on Nutanix files, for example. But it's a question that doesn't have a singular answer.
Yeah. Well, the good news is, our account teams are ready to look into your particular situation as a valued customer. We have folks on staff on the Nutanix side. We have folks on staff on the Citrix side. So, if you are interested, please don't be shy and reach out to your account team so that you could get, a closer view as to what makes the most sense for you in terms of considering a migration strategy. And, you said it best, Paul, like every situation is completely different. If you want to take full advantage of existing contracts that you have and you want to migrate, perhaps workloads at a time, or, contracts at a time, we can certainly entertain some of that move as well, and try to accommodate so that you could relieve some of your burden of already having to educate your teams and obviously coming up with the projects and budgets. So, all right. So I think that that brings us to the top of the hour, guys. I want to thank you so much for having this conversation with us around our joint partnership. I value it. I thank you so much for the inspiring thoughts on how we can help each other out and help our mutual customers navigate these muddy waters, and hopefully that turns into a destination hybrid, to your point, Paul. So thank you guys so much for listening. And I don't know if you have any closing words, Kevin or Paul?
It was great. Thank you, Danny, for inviting me.
Yep, same. Just thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's the end of our webinar. I appreciate you tuning in, and have a great rest of your day. Cheers.
Cheerio.